Hi, this is Phil Cooke, and welcome to this podcast episode. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Alan Thornburgh, who is the Vice President for Strategic Innovation at Masterworks. Masterworks is a major agency based near Seattle that handles large nonprofit organizations, ministry organizations, helps them do donor development, fundraising, strategic planning, and he is just fantastic to talk to. And if you're creative, if you're interested in helping organizations grow, this is going to be an episode for you. And I want to remind you that Ideas on a Deadline, How to Be Creative When the Clock is Ticking, is out there, and I'd encourage you to go get it. This is a book that will help you master deadlines. When you have to deliver great ideas under pressure, there are techniques in here that will completely change your creative outlook and certainly your creative productivity. So, and the thing is, you don't have to be a creative professional to benefit from this. You could be a coach, a teacher, a pastor, a business leader. Whatever you do, you're going to have to deliver projects and presentations and ideas on a deadline. And these are techniques that are really proven, and some interesting research, by the way, too, about how to make brilliant ideas happen when you need them the most. So let's talk a little bit about strategic innovation, and let's go to Alan Thornburgh, who I think is going to give us some really interesting insights into helping organizations grow. Alan, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. I'm really excited about this whole strategic innovation conversation we're about to have, because I love the way you think. Just in our couple phone calls that we've had ahead of time, I just love the way you're thinking about fundraising, about growing organizations, about getting their message out there. So I'm really honored that you come on.
Thank you very much, Phil. It's a real pleasure to be here. And when I look at all the guests that you've had, and I think I'm following up people like Philip Yancey. It's a little nerve-wracking for me, but I assure you that we'll have a good conversation about strategic innovation.
You'll be just fine, just fine. So let me start with this. Coming out of the pandemic, you're at Masterworks. You guys are one of the leading organizations out there helping nonprofits, ministry organizations, churches grow. What do you see coming out of the pandemic that's going to be different about fundraising in the future? Do you see that whole donor development thing shifting a little bit?
Well, I think the tough thing actually, and it's interesting to have this conversation today, the tough thing is that, yes, we're coming out of the pandemic, but we're finding ourselves now, as of today, right, when it's been announced that we do officially have the second consecutive quarter of GDP shrinkage, which by all historical decades of definition is a recession, even if people seem a little nervous about talking about it that way. It doesn't matter how we talk about it in terms of politics. What matters is how people are feeling and what they're going to be doing. And so while the pandemic was something of glory days for people doing fundraising, especially digital fundraising, I think the folks who are going to be in the best shape right now, at least in terms of general donor fundraising, are going to be the ones who have really great sustainer programs, monthly giving programs that aren't like your father's Oldsmobile. They're not the monthly giving programs of yesterday, but they're very different in ways that really matter.
Interesting. Well, I'm kind of into the whole branding thing, and I read a study a couple of years ago that organizations that keep their name out there, keep advertising, keep marketing, stay in front of people during a crisis are organizations that always emerge much stronger after the crisis is over. Is that kind of true in donor development as well?
I think that's absolutely true. Yes. I think what is also key, though, for ministries and other types of nonprofits is not just keeping your name out there, but also having a really, something that fires the imagination that they get to be a part of, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of awesome causes and a lot of great organizations doing really cool stuff that people get to choose from. And so it's one thing to keep your name out there. If you're not doing that, then you're certainly not going to do well coming out of a crisis. But it's also really important to have something that's imaginatively constructed, that invites them into an exceptional experience that they can't get anywhere else, and that really has been designed with people like them in mind.
I love that, and which kind of transitions to my next question. One of the reasons I really like talking to you so much is you also are really big on that fundraising isn't just direct response. It's just not saying, hey, we need money, we need you to support us. Right. You're really big on the narrative element of it, telling the story, doing documentary films, doing things that, in my experience at least, a lot of fundraisers don't think about. A lot of donor development executives aren't thinking about doing a documentary. They're just interested in a direct ask. Whatever we can do online and social media, on film, whatever, is a direct ask. So tell me a little bit about your feeling about telling that story and how important that really is.
Well, I learned firsthand the importance of it. I mean, a lot of these things that come to become important to us come from a place of failure. And so after my time doing the MBA and the corporate America thing, I went to Prison Fellowship and headed up their direct response marketing, as well as the rest of their marketing portfolio over time. And I got to a point where all my data-driven tricks, they weren't working, and what's interesting about that is that it's all these things that we have like taught ourselves and found through, we talk about the value of empirical scientific methods. And there is a lot of value to that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking that by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not the only thing that we need to be doing. Yeah. What that's really good for is talking to your current audience right now about things that they really like. But guess what? They're going to get tired of that thing that they really like right now, because human beings do that. They get bored with things. And so it took me kind of at this point in the late 2000s at Prison Fellowship, in that position of heading up fundraising for them, at least to the 99% of their donors, and running out of a bag of tricks, that made me realize, okay, there's more to data-driven marketing. Let me actually go back in some sense to my MBA days before I got into all the data-driven work in the corporate world. And what did they talk to us about? Understanding your customer, right? And not just understanding your customer, but product and these things where it's like, if you don't understand your customer and you don't understand your product, and you don't have a great product that they're going to love and have a good experience with, all the promotion in the world doesn't matter. It's just you're going to be chasing a dream that you never realized. And so that's why the work that I do now is much more focused on how can we find new audiences for existing organizations to explore, and a way to grow, find new audiences, but learn to speak their language. This can't just be use your existing language that your current audience likes. It has to be, no, I have to care enough to seek out, invite that new audience in as whole people, not just study reports, but actually get to know them, invite them in as whole people into a process that kind of pulls out insights from them in that way, and find out what they're going to love and what fires their imagination, and then build something with true excellence.
It makes me think of all the times I've sat with a leadership team in an organization, and when the conversation gets to social media, for instance, they've got tons of analytics. They can spew analytics all day long, statistics and numbers and everything, but they're still failing. They're just not telling the story well. And I find that I don't want to be generational here, but in many ways we have a generation that's grown up with analytics, and they look at those first before they learn the art of actually telling a story, and how we get how we provide a compelling message, how we create a compelling message out there. So I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that's really remarkable.
Well, and I think that you come also from a business and an industry that has long appreciated that in ways that maybe our industry has not. So I don't want to speak for filmmaking, because you know that 1,000 times better than I do. But one of the things I find really interesting is understanding a little bit about some of the discipline that they use with, okay, we're going to explore different log lines with people as we're trying to figure out which films that we might create. And I'm actually going to sit with people, right, and explore different log lines. I'm not just going to have them go fill out a survey for me. I'm going to actually encounter the whole person, have them respond to log lines before I consider which film to make. And then near the end, when you're in when you're in final production, what are they going to do? They're going to screen these films with people, and with people in seats, and then talk to these people face to face in seats. And so in a sense, you already come from an industry that has embraced this in ways that our industry absolutely has not. But I think will between now and 2030. I think that we've been in this data saturated world that has been so reductive, right? It reduces people down to numbers. It doesn't try to understand them as fully orbed human beings and what they love and what they don't even know that they would love. Yeah. And I think that in some sense your industry is just way ahead of ours. But I think we're going to get there.
Well, so let's talk about that 2030 target. Between now and then, what are some of the changes you're seeing happening out there when it comes to nonprofits, ministry organizations, churches getting their story out, raising the funds to do amazing things? Do you see a lot of things happening? I mean, how are we looking at it in the future?
Well, I think that your folks are going to be even busier than they already are. I mean, in a sense, I think that
Interesting.
we're going to see more film. We're going to see more really innovative product creation. We're going to see more experience creation, and that can seem kind of weird. That can mean a lot of things. Like in some sense, it might mean spatial storytelling, where you're actually, creating environments for people to walk through and to encounter the need in a really visceral way. But I think that it can also be, it will be things that yes are digital or yes are paper, and they might be more like kind of like vinyl strategies, right? Last year was the first year that vinyl outsold, digital music, at least on
I
the
love
CD
that.
form,
I love that.
which is so great, right? And it tells you that there's certain things about the tactile world that people care about. We're not just built to be part of the digital world. As human beings, we're built multifaceted. And I think organizations that have rightly been and understandably been fascinated by what digital can do and have really invested heavily, and I think mostly wisely there, are going to find, okay, it's time to be more creative. Doing something on digital does not mean it's innovative. It's the digital world is 20 some years old by now.
Absolutely.
It's that's very mature, and a lot of I think the most creative things are going to be visceral, digital in a new way. Not just we're putting stuff that's really special out there, but it can be, like I think about the storytelling chatbots that we've done, where you kind of choose your own adventure, or going to be other things I think that we're going to find that are just much more experiential, and organizations are going to take that seriously. And if they're going to take it seriously,
that's good.
That means that one of the errors they're going to stop making is just reducing everybody to data.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that I've always said, during the pandemic, I was trying to get churches to understand the live streaming thing is not an either or deal. We want to have a great live in-person service whenever we can. But we also want to have a great online service. It's a lot like going to a football game. I'm a big football fan, college football fan. And we used to live in Oklahoma, and I would love to go to Sooner games. And there's just nothing like it. The electricity of the excitement, the fans, the game right there in front of you, the bands, everything. But at home, you see things that you can't see in the stadium. I can get special reports. I can hear behind the scenes stories on players. I can see statistics that the people in the stadium don't get. So I've always told pastors and church leaders that we have to make kind of a hybrid experience. We have to make them both amazing. And to your point, it's the questions I think we need to look at is it's not how we want to reach people anymore. It's how they want to reach us. And we have to be available. However, if they want to engage with us online, if they in a digital experience, if they want to engage live, we have to make that an amazing experience, no matter how they want to engage. And so I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's exactly where we need to be.
I think one other thing for 2030 that's going to be really different is I think we're going to see many more organizations doing what I kind of half jokingly call pre-marketing. So one of the things when you think about what it is that we do as marketers, especially as data-driven marketers and data-driven fundraisers, is, and especially the direct response aspect of that, is there's a large percentage of what we're doing, because that's efficiency oriented. We have to find people who already have the requisite baseline beliefs. Like they already have to care a lot about our cause. It's got to be up there in their consideration set in terms of their top few things they care about. And then we're going to send them something, whether it's mail or it's email or it's digital media. We're going to send them something that has been tested with people just like them, and that is capturing this response from them. But the starting point is the people who already believe that this cause is really important. And I think the real opportunity is to say, well, what's bigger? The number of people who already care about your cause, or the number of people who already care about your cause plus the number of people who are winnable to your cause? And I think that we have, and I know from some of the projects that we've done, that we have this opportunity to actually help, work on the audience before they kind of come into our marketing funnel and help them take on beliefs and priorities.
That's good.
That they don't already have. And it's to actually get them to that place where they're like, oh, now I see, like, they may have a latent interest or they may have a latent belief, but it's not up there in terms of priority and importance such that they would say, oh, I want to volunteer for that, or, oh, I want to give to that. And so, we can't, there are methods, frankly, some of them are more on the data-driven side, but also absolutely firing the human imagination, because you have to, in order to reach those people and make them think differently, we have to remember that thinking process, it doesn't all just happen rationally. This is not, we may be children of the Enlightenment in a certain sense, but let's not leave behind what the Romantics taught us, right? Which is just of what happens in the imagination. You can't take on new beliefs until you experience it in your imagination. And so and you all know that, right? As storytellers, that you're trying to put ideas into someone's and have them experience something in their imagination. And in doing that, they can take on new beliefs. Documentary films are some of the best things in terms of getting people to take on new beliefs. Nonprofit leaders and ministry leaders, we've got to start to have a new humility, right? We have to have a humility about what we know. Like, we tend to believe that we know the most important things that are required for us to grow in our organizations. But we also, I think, have to have a real intentional humility to know what we don't know. And so we kind of we inadvertently write off all these people who aren't interested in our current cause, when really we could be very intentional about how can we get them to a point where, look, there's going to be a lot of people out there who are never going to come along to our cause. But let's not just look at it as a binary function of people who already love my cause and everybody else, because there's for most of these causes, there's a vast quantity of winnable people out there. Yeah. And if we care enough to get to know them and love them, frankly, and meet them and want to know what moves them and want to know, okay, what they might love about this cause may be really different from the people who are all in. But let's care enough to find out what that looks like and appeal to that and to help them help shape this nascent, maybe latent, low-level idea, like where they go, well, yeah, I guess that's kind of important. We can move that up till they go, this really is important, and we can even measure that change in belief over time.
That's pretty powerful. So you're the vice president of strategic innovation there at Masterworks. What does that mean exactly? When you talk about innovation, what are you talking about?
Well, we are really focused on, I'd say, two things. So, the great majority of Masterworks, we've got, 130, 140 people, and they are really smart practitioners. And what they're great at is helping organizations to meet their, the fiscal year budgets that they've got for this year and for next year through fundraising, help them meet that in a way that is, data driven and that's really smart, and that their existing audience is really going to love. And yes, we do a lot of data driven strategies, especially digital, which we've been very, very successful with in recent years in growing those audiences. What I'd say my team does is take more of a channel agnostic perspective, which is to say, okay, reality is most things we're going to pilot in digital, right? I mean, that's just because we can learn so much quicker in digital and we can do things much more cheaply. But there's really two things that our team it's basically like a little skunkworks team. And what we're focused on are two main things. How can we help you identify the new audience that you can bring on, and how can we help you to know them in a way that we can be effective? And then once we've identified a new experience that we ought to create, either for that new audience or for your existing audience, to keep them with you, frankly, and to keep them excited about what you do, how can we create a new experience that's going to exceed all expectations? So that's at the core of what we do. It's really the majority are those two things. Now, of course, we are always exploring things that are a little bit further over the horizon. But those are the two most reliable forms of innovation, and we do that through a human-centered design process. So this is not just, well, let's every project we approach in some completely different way and reinvent the wheel. We have a process that helps us to encounter people as whole people, and yet has proven itself over and over again. It was really human-centered design. If you really understand it, it's been around for decades. I'd say it was popularized by the IDEO design firm, which is more out in your neck of the woods than mine.
Yeah.
And they really popularized the idea, and we've reshaped and adapted it to what works best in our space. But basically, the way to think about it is that before a new experience gets put into the marketplace, whether it's a new sustainer program, or it's a digital documentary series, or it's like with this one that we're getting ready to launch right now, it's a letter writing campaign where you can digitally engage with people who are incarcerated, and yet in a way that protects your identities. And so all sorts of different types of experiences. But by the time that we have launched that, the audience has encountered it as whole people and fed into the development of that process 3 times. So it's got their fingerprints all over it. When it goes to launch, we know it's going to be successful. We'll still have a lot of tinkering to do to really optimize into performance. But this is about the discipline of innovation, not, hey, let's just all pow, 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 go into a whiteboard session and come up with nutty ideas. No, it's like, this is a discipline just like any other discipline.
That's really good. That's really, as you were saying that earlier, I was thinking, where do you start in all this? It's just interesting to me that, what kind of experience is right for prison fellowship versus Salvation Army versus something else. That's a lot of creative thinking there, trying to figure out what that experience could be, can be, and what experience will work. It's just fascinating stuff, actually.
Thanks. Yeah, we love it. And I'd say one of the things is also that our clients love it. I mean, this is not a situation, which is often the case between, nonprofits and ministries working with an agency, where they come to the agency and say, we trust you, go create this thing for us and put it in the marketplace. This is very co-creative.
That's cool.
At every point, we're honoring the people that, frankly, God's bringing together to do this work, whether it's, our subject matter experts, because we certainly have a number of them, but also the expertise that folks in these great ministries have. And they have an expertise, and especially an informed intuition that we can't replicate. They've earned that and developed that over years and years. I think back of when I was at Prison Fellowship, we had consultants come in all the time who were like, I've got an idea. And I was like, oh no, I know, oh no. And it's like, it was always some idea that we had all discussed like 3 or 4 times, and there's reasons that we weren't doing it. And that's the reality with these clients. They're really smart people, and they have a lot to contribute. So this is very much a collaborative effort that we're doing together. And the third party in that collaborative effort really is the audience. They are brought in at the very beginning. And, at the very beginning, it's like, it's very expansive. We're really trying to understand very broadly, like, what is it that they love about completely different organizations? What is it about other causes that really move them? What are some of the most profound experiences they've had that had nothing to do with nonprofits or church or anything? Good. And so it's very, very expansive. And the first time around, the second time we go to them, we have, we talked about log lines a few minutes ago. Yeah. It's more like what we call paper prototypes, which are, how do we build out a concept? So it's got basic, you've got some basic visuals, a few core ideas, and then a narrative. And how do we bring a number of those and see which ones really pop with the audience? Again, face to face, in a fully, in bringing them in as the whole person. And then finally, before we press go live on something, we want them to go through the whole experience with really fresh eyes, because we've all gotten really close to that experience. And invariably, they'll usually find something that we've missed and that we get to fix before we go to market, which is great.
So if there was one thing you would tell nonprofit organizations, ministry organizations, churches not to do anymore, what are they doing wrong that you would love to just, if you could get them all in a room listening to our podcast, what would you tell them to stop doing?
Well, I've already talked enough about data and its limitations, so I can bang that drum. And now I say that as someone who used to run in a Fortune 500 company, a marketing and analytics team. I totally believe in it. It's good stuff. You should do analytics. We do analytics, and it has its role. Okay. But I've already kind of said a lot about how we over rely on it, right? It keeps us from being imaginative sometimes if we don't treat it, if we don't use it for what it's good for, and instead use it as a thing that limits our thinking. The thing I would focus on if I had them was actually not to do the same thing with brand. It's interesting how we sometimes see that some of the best experiences that we could create for an organization, they're not really willing to do because they take such a strict view of their brand that that it doesn't feel like them. But what I feel like the best brands that I've seen are ones that they find a way to accommodate a really great product or a really great experience if they know that their audience is going to love it. Now, you can take that to an extreme that's very silly, of course. But in the main, I'd say that sometimes we get and we do brand work, so we believe in brand, but sometimes we can like treat it as such a precious thing where we can't really even explore the edges of the brand. And I would say that this to like, let us explore the edges of the brand, because by exploring the edges of your brand, we might be able to bring something really special to the marketplace that your audience is going to love.
I love that, because just recently I was working with a big nonprofit that was just like that. I mean, they had attorneys in the room. They had a brand Nazi in the room. They were so careful about doing anything new, anything different. They were absolutely convinced the way they've always done things was the right way. And it wasn't. It was going downhill fast. And but they just weren't willing to try something different, push the envelope a little bit. And well, that's a really good word. Really, really good word. I like that a lot. All right, let me ask you this. So a lot of people listening to this podcast or watching are in what I would call emerging ministries, emerging nonprofits. They're small. They don't have, 10, 20, 30,000 names on a mailing list. They're just getting launched. Maybe they're doing some acquisitions with email addresses and things like that. Give me a word of encouragement. What are some of the tips you might give to an emerging idea, emerging cause, emerging movement that could really help them get off center and get moving forward when it comes to fundraising, donor development, awareness, that kind of thing?
Well, there's a few things that come to mind. The first one is that they should think about the strength of their position, which is by nature, when you're having to be scrappy and you're having to fight for every bit of growth, what does that mean? It means that you have to be really in touch with who your audience is and who your customers are. You don't have the luxury of sitting back and doing as I did at Prison Fellowship, where seriously, for a decade, I never once went out to meet my donors. It's crazy. Maybe I did thank you calls or something, but like I never actually, and to be honest, there's most of the folks that I talk to, it's the same thing with them too. And they make the same mistake. And so the entrepreneur or the person who's, starting up a new nonprofit or something, they don't have that luxury. They depend, all their success depends on, I got to know how my folks think. And so that's a real strength for them. Good. So, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And the second thing I would say is not to doubt their own abilities to be creative. Now, I think sometimes it takes a professional facilitator to really bring that out of them. But, I think human beings are created to be creative, and that creativity can look different in all of us. And there are, I'm a creative person. That doesn't mean you want me, writing a film script, right? You don't, but it comes, but I've got my own place. And I think that everyone's got to understand that just because they don't have a creative title, that doesn't mean that they can't be very creative people. A good starting point, if I could go back to my 20-year-old self, I would say, learn to love poetry. And maybe that's a weird thing, but it's only in the last few years, really kind of because of people like Malcolm Guite and some others who have really grown to appreciate the power of poetry and the power of like special bits of prose in fiction, back to the power of the imagination. And we have to like really honor the imagination, not just as a, not just for marketing out there and trying to get people to imagine something differently, but our own imaginations. I mean, the imagination is not, it is a truth-bearing faculty to a degree, just like other, just like the sciences are. And so I would say, develop your own creativity, and anyone can.
Well, fundraising is about creativity. There's no question about that. It's funny that when my book, Ideas on a Deadline, came out recently, I had a couple guys who do donor development, and they scarfed it up right away. And they said, right. You know what? Fundraising has, relentless regularity. We have to come up with new ideas constantly. And so they wanted to brush up on techniques to how to make that happen. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And also another thing that I'd love for you to comment on is, I also kind of believe, some people, when they say donor development or fundraiser, and when they think direct mail. Others think email blasts. Others think direct, going out and meeting people and finding big donors. But the truth is, everything you do is fundraising. Your social media campaign is going to reflect it. Your email blasts are going to reflect it. Everything you do in an organization reflects your purpose and your mission and your cause. Say just a word about how important it is to integrate all those things together in such a way that it makes such an impact.
Yeah, I do think that integrate, IMC, integrated marketing campaigns. That's been an established discipline for a long time. I think that one of the things that may be actually working against sometimes that type of integration is the fact that back to a little bit to data. We've come to have great expectations for attribution, right? Which is to say, okay, if I'm you just mentioned mail and email, and we could also put digital media ads in there as well, and say, okay, I want to know, in order to justify my investment in those things, I want to know that X amount of revenue is coming back, X amount of people's generous giving is coming back, which shows the prudence of that investment. And there's a lot of wisdom in that. But we have to not be dogmatic about it. We have to hold that intention and understand that some of our best ways of communicating, we're just not going to have that kind of attribution associated with them. The promise that we're going to, there's been this, promise over the last 5 years that if we just tie all the data together just right, we will actually see how these other things early on kind of informed. And we never quite realize that kind of attribution. And that comes down to just, having a little bit of comfort with ambiguity and knowing, I'm a smart person. And if I'm staying close to my donors, I can probably, as close to my audience, I can probably get a pretty good sense along with the data as to whether or not these things are working together the way that I think that they are.
That's good. And I can prove that in my own life. I'm thinking, for all the people that tell me that direct mail is dead, I don't give, when I get a letter from an organization I'm supporting, I don't necessarily give through that letter. I don't use the responsive envelope, but it's a reminder. I set that thing on my desk, and I'll either go on my computer or go to my iPhone and make the deposit in that way. So there's no way they could measure that letter as being successful. However, it was, because it was a great reminder for me, and it was like a bookmark to say, I got to go, support those people. So you're right. It all does work together.
Well, I'm curious about if it's okay. Is it okay for me to ask a question, Phil?
If it's okay for me not to answer, that depends.
All right. Well, we'll see if you answer. I think back to kind of the disciplines of filmmaking, which in a way that I never will. And what is it that you think? I think about that log lines bit. I'm like, I know that. Like everybody else, I read Save the Cat, right? So I know the bit about log lines, and I know a little bit about about how they screen movies, and sometimes completely change endings of movies and things based upon how they see folks responding. I wonder if you have any thoughts as to what you think that the fundraising community could learn from the filmmaking community.
Well, that's an interesting thing. It's one of the things is, I think, you've seen the success of sequels out there, and a lot of people hate sequels, but they make a whole lot of money. I'm going to see one tonight. I'm going to a screening of one tonight. And it's interesting that people do like a familiar story. And very often what I find in organizations is, we're inside an organization, we're doing the direct mail campaigns, or we're doing the social media campaigns, or the short videos, or the ads, whatever. And after a while, we get sick of hearing about that theme or that thing. It drives us nuts. In a church situation, when a pastor does a sermon series and people are trying to promote it, they'll often tell me, man, I'm so sick of this. I feel like blowing my brains out. But I've discovered that about the time we get sick of hearing it internally, the people out there, it's just barely breaking through.
Oh,
and
man,
so
that's so true.
I think we give up on things too soon. I think,
yes.
There's life in campaigns and ideas and some of the projects that we do that we don't even think about. And just because we get sick of it, because we're in there every day dealing with it. But a good example is, in my experience, producing weekly television programs, I've discovered even the most hardcore viewers rarely see more than 1 or 2 shows a month. And so that means when you rerun the show, you're not really rerunning it. You're showing it for the first time to half your audience. So I just think that very often, one thing Hollywood gets is if X-Men worked so well, maybe let's do the sequel. Let's do the sequel. People like that familiar, they call it the Marvel universe, the Marvel Comics universe. And people love the stories that are coming out of that. So that's a little bit that I find that very often organizations that we've worked with, they bail on a campaign too soon, I think. And obviously, if you really sense that you've hit a wall and it's not working and people aren't responding at all, I get it. But very often, I think with a little tweak, we could make that live for much longer and keep that cause in front of people's face, keep them excited much longer than we do. So I don't know if that's what you were going for, but that's an example I see a lot from my side of the fence.
I wasn't going for anything. I love that answer. And you're making me think of some really painful examples where I know that folks have given up too soon on something that was really valuable and you knew was just getting ready to hit its stride.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me ask you this as we kind of wrap this up. Give me a word of encouragement. If I'm out there and I'm a ministry leader, a nonprofit leader, frustrated about, we're coming out of the COVID thing. I'm unsure about how, what the future is going to look like. What should I be thinking about? What should my priorities be? Well, give me a few tips.
That's great. So I'll focus mainly on one thing, which is back to sustainer programs. And when we say sustainer programs, this isn't just, well, let's give monthly. Will you give monthly to this organization you already like? We have to be thinking about what are you really asking them to do? You are asking them to give you their credit card number, which you're going to ding every month in perpetuity with no end date. It's a much bigger deal than give $20. We do that at the grocery store. Okay. But when you're asking somebody to do that, you need to show up really differently. And it's not just where we're just going to try new things. We have to launch something in the marketplace that we already know in advance they love. And so I'd say with that in mind, any organization can do that. And it's not too late if you haven't. The organizations that are really going to be struggling over the next couple of 3 years are going to be those that don't have really sweet sustainer programs that are built around an experience that people love and that's good and that really engages them and that they care about. They're going to let go, and these are good people, these people who give, and they're going to let go of some things because they have to, not because they're not willing to sacrifice enough, not because they're not good people, but because they're going to have to make some hard choices. And they're going to choose the things that didn't show up in a way that really excited them such that they were willing to sign up on a monthly basis and subscribe, if you will, to become a part of this thing. It also, by the way, is the thing that gives them the best experience. Because if you think about it, people, if we stick to just single gift fundraising, where every time that they're going to give, it's because we sent something out that they responded to, that does wear on people, and especially in a recessionary setting, they become very sensitive to that. And I think that, I know that what they much prefer is not to be asked because they've already signed up. And maybe, occasionally like this special thing, for this, we know we really love that you're an XYZ partner, but are you willing to give this one time? Sure, that's a totally different situation. And they absolutely love that as well. But invite them into something that's really that is meaningful, and it's not too late. So organizations that have kind of been putting it off when they shouldn't have, my encouragement, since that's what you're looking for, my encouragement to them is it's not too late.
That's good. That's a good word. Well, thank you for coming on, man. I'm already thinking of part two. I need to have you back because this is just there's so many people out there with questions about donor development and fundraising and launching projects. And I just think the way you think and how you do it with the major clients that you work with could really help a lot of people. So thank you so much for coming on. This has been fantastic.
Awfully kind of you, Phil. And thanks for your awesome work in the kingdom. We need people with your kind of creative skills and your ability to construct stories that honor God and move people. So thanks for your work, and thanks for having me on the show.
Well, that was fantastic information. I'm always curious. I mean, if you're a creative person, you understand, how do we make organizations grow? How do we get the word out there about them? If you're working at a nonprofit or a church or a ministry organization especially, you need to share this with people on your team, because these insights of Alan's are really quite remarkable. And I encourage you to get the word out there, because people need to hear what he has to say and see what Masterworks is doing. And just a reminder, my new book, Ideas on a Deadline, How to Be Creative When the Clock is Ticking. You can get it from Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You could get it from my blog at philcooke.com. And I would remind you, come visit philcooke.com. Remember, it's Cooke with an E. I'm always writing and dealing with issues that you're wrestling with. If you're a creative leader or you lead creative people, I'm always dealing with those kind of issues on my blog, and I'd encourage you to go check it out. Thanks for tuning in. Now, share this with people. Like I say, share it with people who need this kind of information. Give us a rating. That certainly helps us go up and get a bigger audience. So we're grateful for you being here and grateful for your help. Thank you so much.